In the alternate history community online, you often see memes and maps of greater versions of countries. France that borders the Rhine, a US that includes Canada, or a Greece that has control of Thrace and Constantinople. The word for movements that support such things is irredentism. Irredentism describes a number of different movements around the world that support claiming or reclaiming land which they see as lost or unredeemed parts of their corresponding country. There can be a number of reasons for irredentist movements, including the land being within the historical bounds of the nation, or maybe within the cultural bounds of the people of said nation. Irredentism has been the underlying reason for many wars and referendums throughout history, one being the Second World War, where Germany wanted parts of Poland as they had been a part of Germany, and also the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, as it had a large culturally German population. There was also the referendum in Schleswig after World War I, where Northern Schleswig voted to reunite with Denmark, as the people there were mostly Danish. In this video, I will show some examples of irredentist scenarios for several countries, not going into detail as to their alternate history, but rather just showing the countries at their largest, as well as more realistic irredentist borders. If you want me to go into more depth with any of these fictional larger countries, please feel free to leave a comment, as this video will only take a quick look at the several different countries. Also feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and want me to do more videos like this with different irredentist scenarios. First, we'll take a look at Denmark, a country that doesn't get too much attention in the alternate history community. Denmark at its height was the head of the Kalmar Union, which controlled all of the Nordic region. If you also add land that has been under Denmark at any point in history, you get this, which includes some of northern Germany, the Baltics, England, as well as several colonies around the world. A more realistic irredentist scenario, apart from the Kalmar Union staying united, would be this: a Denmark that has all the land that was historically part of the Danish realm, and culturally Danish. This includes southern Schleswig, which was mostly Danish-speaking up until Prussia conquered it in 1864, and gradually converted the area to German culture over the years. It also includes the provinces of Scania or Skåne, Halland, and Blekinge. These territories were historically a core part of Denmark, just as important as Jutland and the Danish Strait Islands. Even today, some Scanian citizens would prefer to reunite with Denmark, as they're much closer to Copenhagen than Stockholm, and still have cultural and linguistic Danish roots. Just to make sure the Swedes don't unleash their wrath on this video, we'll take a quick look at a greater Sweden. Sweden at its height was quite a bit larger than today. It controlled Finland, the province of Trøndelag, and much of the Baltic, including the Russian Baltic coast. It also had the island of Bornholm, which it lost after Danish uprisings across the Scania region, which only managed to succeed on Bornholm. Lastly, it controlled western Pomerania and Bremen-Verden. If you include all lands that have been under Sweden at some point, it also has control of Norway, so it essentially spans across all the Nordics except for Denmark and Iceland. It would also have several smaller colonies around the world. It is also worth mentioning that Sweden has been quite lucky with its history, as unlike with Denmark, the core Swedish cultural lands are within Sweden today. All the extra lands at Sweden's height were for the most part not Swedish culturally, so a more realistic irredentist Sweden would not be too much larger than today, and simply include the Swedish-speaking Åland Islands, as well as some of the Finnish coast, which has a Swedish-speaking population. Before we take a look at the next one, I would like to warn all Turks in advance. Please don't go crazy and hate me because of this. I hope you can forgive me, and you will have your time to shine in another video. Greece is a country with a very active irredentist movement online. Not only Greeks, but also history nerds around the world talk about reclaiming the great city of Constantinople. It's difficult to simply show Greece at its height, as the Greeks have both been divided into many city-states and have been in charge of multiple continent-spanning empires. The 3 points where Greeks controlled the most land in history in order are ancient Greece, with their colonies across the Mediterranean. These were all divided and fought with each other, but it was quite a large Greek cultural sphere. Then there was also the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great, which spread Greek culture and language across the east. And finally, the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which with time left behind its Latin language and heritage, becoming a mostly Greek descendant of the much larger Roman Empire. If you overlay these, you get all the land that has ever been under any form of Greek control. It's essentially the entire classical world and an absolute monster of an empire, spanning from Iberia, France and Italy, all the way to the Indian subcontinent. A more realistic Greater Greece today would simply consist of the Megali idea, proposed at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. It would include what was at the time regions with a majority or plurality of Greek speakers, adding Thrace, Constantinople, and Ionia and Western Anatolia to Greece. Today these regions speak Turkish though, as the Turks had a population exchange with Greece in the early 1900s, where Greeks were forced to move to Greece, and Turks in Greece the opposite. Most of the ones that managed to stay were culturally assimilated. The United States doesn't have any major irredentist movements, as it is really already very close to its territorial height, excluding military occupations. The only one of note is maybe the movement for transferring Greenland from Denmark to the US. If you were to include places that have been under US occupation in the America at its height scenario, it has still directly controlled a larger portion of the world than it does today. Instead of going into depth with all of these occupation, which would take pretty long, I'll simply list the places that have been under US occupation. Afghanistan, Iraq, Japan, Korea, Southern Germany, Greenland, the Philippines, Cuba, Panama, Nicaragua, and Haiti. There are more countries and parts of countries that have been invaded by the US, which I chose not to include, as they weren't proper occupations and the US left as soon as the conflicts were over. Realistically though, these places would not stay part of the United States. And a more realistic irredentist scenario for the United States is oddly enough one that is actually even larger. The United States has a huge cultural sphere of influence that frankly covers the entire world with few exceptions. But it's especially prominent in what we call the Western world. But of course, the US annexing the entire Western world isn't realistic either. So I would say that the most realistic irredentist US, or Greater US, is one that also controls Canada and Greenland. Canada is extremely close to the US culturally, and almost all Canadians live just a few miles from the American border. There are also many points in history where the US could have acquired Canada, had wars or political relations gone down different paths. And Greenland could also have been bought from Denmark at several points in history, and has been under US occupation during World War II, as Denmark was occupied by Germany. A video about alternate larger countries wouldn't be complete without taking a look at the world's smallest country. The Vatican City was not always just the Vatican City. Before the unification of Italy, it was the Papal States, one of the largest of many Italian states. The Papal States at its height controlled much of central Italy, reaching all the way from Naples in southern Italy and all the way up to the Duchy of Milan in the north. They also controlled the city of Avignon in southern France. I doubt they would realistically keep all of those lands, especially the ex-slaves. So, a realistic irredentist Papal States in my eyes would be one in a universe where Italy was never united and it simply kept its core lands in the center of Italy. This video was heavily inspired by a YouTuber by the name of Masaman, or just Mason, who has made several videos on irredentism. Go check out his channel if you're interested in geography and demographic related videos such as this. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button if you want to see more content like this in the future. See you in my next video.